I hope you're all okay. My name is Nassim Ahmed. I am a journalist at the Middle East Monitor. It's a real pleasure to have you all here today. It's a real pleasure to have Dr. Marzouki here as well, for our for this evening. The plan really is for Dr. Marzouki to present for about 10-15 minutes, and then Dr. Dawood Abdullah, the director of the Middle East Monitor, will be a discussant who will ask some questions, discussion, and then we'll open the floor up for question and answers in the last half an hour or so.
Thank you, Nassim. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's a great honor to have Dr. Marzouki with us here in London. He is, without doubt, one of the most prominent advocates for human rights and democracy in the Middle East. He has been, particularly over the last decade, in one of the most turbulent periods in the history of the Middle East. Many of you have seen him on Al Jazeera in the years and the months leading up to the Arab Spring. And although he is a Tunisian and eventually became the president of Tunisia, he has concerns and has spoken out on regional issues. So he's not just speaking today in his capacity as a Tunisian, but as an Arab who has had immense concerns about the development that have unfolded in the region. I want to, because Palestine is, really at the top of the regional agenda and international agenda, I will take the liberty to ask Dr. Marzouki to begin his discussion about Palestine, because really Palestine and their struggle has been very close and intertwined with that of the Tunisian people. If you remember, after 1982, the PLO was forced to relocate into Tunisia. And some of the leaders, Khalil al-Wazir was killed in Tunisia. So there is a special relationship. And the events in Palestine today, particularly in Gaza, I'm sure Dr. Marzouki will have some insights and concerns and observations about that. Not least because one of the most outstanding aerospace engineers, Mohammed al-Zouari, was assassinated in his hometown in Tunisia, and he was closely aligned to the Palestinian resistance. So this is my entry. This is what I will, we will come to Tunisia, no doubt, and the Arab Spring and successes, failures, mistakes, pitfalls, etc. But Dr. Marzouki, if you may just give us your own observations on the situation in Palestine today. The question of normalization, it's a big question. The Americans and Israelis hope that in the post-war period, the process of normalization will gain momentum. And this has been a debate in Tunisia while you were, in the presidency and after the Arab Spring, to the extent that people were pointing out that any contact with the Israelis should be criminalized according to Tunisian law. So, give us your insights, your perspectives on how things have unfolded in Gaza and in Palestine, and what are your let's say, views on the future, anticipating the future for Palestine and the region.
Thank you. First of all, I'm grateful for this invitation, and thank you all for being here, sharing with me some thoughts about what's happening in our region. I will be frank with you. I see a link between what's happening in Syria and what's happening in Gaza. The link is a simple concept for me, which is independence. In 1990, that's about 35 years ago, I wrote a book The title was The Second Independence. And in this book I said, very simple ideas. I hope not simplistic. Very simple, but I hope not simplistic. What I was to say is that the last Arab people to fight for its first independence is Palestine. All the other countries, we get rid of the colonial states. But in fact, we're dealing with a new kind of occupation, a new kind of dictatorship. It's an internal dictatorship. And I said at the time that, in fact, now we have to fight for a new kind of independence, democracy. And I said democracy will be our second independence, because we get rid of, corrupt elite, repressive elite, etc., etc. So, when I see the very moment now we're watching in the Middle East, it seems for me that it's, the Syrian people is fighting for, it's probably the most difficult battle against this harsh and corrupt dictatorship. So the Syrian people is fighting for the second independence, and he is winning this second independence, paying important. I think the Syrians have paid the price, the heaviest price for their second independence than any other people. While the Palestinians now are they fighting for their first independence, and this is also the Palestinians are also paying a very heavy price, for this first independence. So the word independence is for me the central concept to understand what's happening in the world. What was called the Arab Spring for me was just this period of time where the Arab nations were fighting against this internal occupation. I do believe that Egypt now is occupied by its own army. I do believe that Algeria is now occupied by its own army. I do believe that Saudi Arabia, the people of Saudi Arabia is under occupation, under internal occupation. And I always say that probably if you ask Syrian, what do you prefer, to be under French occupation or under the Assad occupation? What was the most difficult for you? Of course, Syrian would always say that, look, under French occupation, it was like heaven, just compare with the price we have paid, to get rid of dictatorship of Assad. But now the problem is what will be the outcome of. As I told you, I do believe that the Arab Spring was just the last period of time of this countries, of these people fighting for the second independence. The process will continue. The people who say that the Arab Spring is over, for me, they don't understand anything. The process is on the way, and the process will never stop before we got this second independence. So, and what would be the outcome in Syria and now in Gaza? In Syria, I think they have paid very, very high price to get the second independence. And I think the process will continue in Egypt, will continue in Tunisia, and everywhere where we still have dictatorship. What will be the outcome in Syria? I don't know exactly what will be. I'm afraid that, they are still, the revolution is still very fragile, and they are surrounded by a lot of countries that don't have interested at all in having new democratic states in this area. So I expect that they will have a lot of problems, they will have a lot of problems coming from Saudi Arabia, coming from the Emirates, coming from Iran, etc. So I'm very much upset and very much afraid. I don't believe that they will let them gain this second independence, because they will fight against this exactly the same way they fought against the second independence in Egypt, in Tunisia, elsewhere. So the fight is, I think we have a lot of, we have to expect a lot of problems. We have to expect that probably it will last, I wouldn't say decades, but it won't be easy. It has never been easy, and it will not be easy for Syria. As far as Gaza is concerned, the problem with the first independence, as I told you, the Palestinian people is the last people, the last Arab people, and the last, I think, people in the world fighting for the forced independence. Of course, we are very proud of what happened in Gaza. Of course, we think that, I do believe that Gaza prevailed in this war against Israel because politically, humanly, the narrative of Israel is broken forever. Nobody would now, mainly here in the West, I think, would accept the narrative of Israel. So what happened in Gaza, it extremely, once again, as Arab, we are very proud of what's happened in Gaza. We do believe that this would encourage also political forces in the Arab world, to take once again to the street. For the moment, it seems that something wrong with it, because when you compare, when we see that the Western youth, took to the street, where the Arab youth seems, to be very passive. But be sure that, I always say that the word Arab Spring is not very accurate, because in fact I prefer the word of Arab volcanoes. And you know that Arab volcanoes, you see that the volcanoes would erupt, but you never know when they would erupt. This is exactly the situation in the Arab world. For the moment, the Egyptian volcano, the Tunisian volcano, even the Saudi volcano, they are quiet, but I'm not sure that it would last, because inside these volcanoes you have so high pressure of poverty, of corruption, of repression, etc., that it will burst. It's just a matter of time. So when you go back to the situation of Gaza, I do believe that the narrative of Israel is broken but I'm very sorry to say it, but I'm very pessimistic about the short and the last time, because what would be the outcome? Talking now about this two-state solution, for me, it's completely false. To have just look at the map, and you would see that you have 2 million of Arabs inside Israel. We have 1 million of settlers in the West Bank. I don't see exactly what would happen. How can we have a Palestinian state in this area? So I'm afraid that the outcome, I hope I'm wrong, and I would like to have your own opinion about what's going to happen. If you accept that the two-state solution is too late, just because of the way, just have a look at the map and you will understand why. I do believe that it's too late. So what will be the outcome? I'm afraid would it be the war forever, or the Mandela solution, what I call the Mandela solution? And I'm fighting, and I'm hoping, I'm trying, with some friends to think about this, what I call the Mandela solution, which means democratic states for all people living in this area. But the level of hatred after this war is so high that sometimes I think I'm dreaming, because the Mandela solution with this level of hatred after this war is probably very naive. But when I remember that the level of hatred between French and German, the level of hatred between whites and black in South Africa also was extremely high. So why don't we dream about this kind of solution? Because in fact, the choice would be the Netanyahu solution or the Mandela solution. And this is my deep conviction. The Netanyahu solution means war forever, which means more blockade Gaza, more apartheid within Israel, more colonization in the West Bank. That means more and more war. And this is, I don't believe at all in this normalization. Forget about it, because the Israelis are doing everything, to sabotage this kind of normalization, and nobody would, in the Arab world, would believe or accept this kind of normalization. Because normalization would be accepting blockades of Gaza, accepting apartheid in Israel, and accepting colonization nobody would accept it. So I'm very optimistic on the long term for the second independence of Arab people, because the fight now is not over. People who saying that Arab Spring has failed, they are totally wrong. I think it's the very beginning of the beginning of the beginning of the process, and the process will continue until we reach our objective. And the objective now is being people, citizens, having states at the service of the people and not the people at the service of the state. This process will continue, and the new generation, I'm deeply convinced that the new generation will achieve this project. It seems that it takes a long time to achieve this project, but I do believe this. But for Gaza, I am afraid that if we don't go to this Mandela solution, it will be war and war forever, and we have to expect more and more trouble. And but the most important thing, the Palestinian has sent a very strong message. Especially, I imagine that you have seen the Palestinian moving to the north of Gaza, sending a very strong message to Mr. Netanyahu and mainly also to Mr. Trump, saying, hey, we're going to stick to our country, we're not leaving. So the Palestinian people is sending a strong message to the whole world that we stick to our country and we will fight. What will be the outcome, I don't know. I hope once again that we will wish peace in this region, but I'm not sure that for the moment this will be possible, unless it's the end of the far rights in Israel, the far rights in the United States, but I don't see this coming very soon. I will stop here because once again I would like to have your insight, your vision of what could be the solution do you still believe that two-state solution is accurate, or if you don't believe that, what would be the outcome? What do you think yourself that would be the best solution? I will stop here because I'm very interested in to hear from the public and not.
This is just one issue that I wanted to raise, and then we will open up, of course, as Dr. Marzouki says. He's very keen to hear from you. But I want to just shift the dial towards Tunisia itself, which at one point was seen as a model for this democratic process and change in the region that took place after 2012. And somehow that process quickly unraveled, and we are at a state today where there is very little room for political participation in Tunisia today. Journalists, opposition figures are all imprisoned. So we know, and there's been lots of talk about external intervention in Tunisia, particularly from certain Gulf countries. But Dr. Marzouki, would you be able to shed some light also on what happened internally? Because it was not just like external, intervention. Were the internal political forces responsible for this stalling of the democratic change that was envisaged in 2012?
Tunisia could have been a success story because I would say that Tunisia was very easy. It was when you compare to Syria, for instance, or compare to Libya, or you compare to Egypt, Tunisia is a middle-class society, well-educated society, homogeneous society. We don't have any, sects, religion, etc. And we don't have also military like in Egypt or like in Algeria. Very close to the West, we have well-educated elite, etc., and both the middle class also. So really, we have all the factors, to achieve real and genuine democracy. But we failed mainly because of internal and external factors. I think there was a regional veto against democratization in Tunisia, mainly from region dictatorship. The dictatorship in the Arab world, they were very united. They were extremely afraid of this wave of contest coming from Tunisia to Libya to Egypt, etc. So they have done everything, to sabotage the process. Everything. They paid a lot of money, to by the corrupt media. They sent people killing. We have had a lot of political assassination, etc., etc. But I think the most important thing is the internal factors. I was surprised as a Democrat to see that, in fact, the very tools of democracy have been used by the anti-democracy to kill democracy itself. For instance, I give you just one example. It said, okay, freedom of expression for everybody, etc., etc. In fact, this freedom of expression was used, to sabotage the process of democratization. We said we have to accept that Tunisia would have all kind of political parties, and in fact, they have got a lot of money coming from outside, to fund corrupt political parties which really did everything to destroy democracy. So this was the most. It was very, very surprising to see that the tools of democracy could be used to kill democracy. And this is exactly what happened. Because after 3 years, free and democratic election brought back, the old regime back to the governments, and very democratically, I think we used the fair elections. Doesn't mean that they would promote, people who fought for democracy. No, because of the corrupt media or a lot of money, etc., they brought back the old regime, and the old regime, of course, destroyed everything. And now we have the coup. This guy, is current president, has been elected fairly, and because we fought for more than 2 or 3 decades, to impose democracy, they use the democracy to destroy democracy. So we have to be very, very careful for the new generation, trying to set up a new democracy, very, very careful about the tools of democracy. You can kill the democracy with the tools of democracy.
So, and give you an opportunity now to question Dr. Marzouki, to raise some of your own concerns about his experience in Tunisia, as well as his work in France and his campaigning for human rights and in Africa. So the floor is open. Let's see.
I like your use of the metaphor of the Arab population being like a volcano, not an Arab Spring. So the question then is, when does that volcano erupt? So I want to use that with what's happening in Palestine at the moment, with President Donald Trump announcing that one of the options on the table is for the Palestinians in Gaza to be populated, moved to, ethnically cleansed to Egypt and Jordan. Of course, the Arab regimes, they don't exist in a vacuum. They also have to consider their population. It's not because Mohammed bin Salman or the UAE or Egypt or Jordan, they love the Palestinian population, and therefore they will not allow President Donald Trump to implement his plan. It's because there has to be some stake for them. And I'm wondering, they are of course listening to their public, listening to their population. If they were to allow the Palestinians into their country, there may be another uprising. So do you think that could be a trigger for the Arab volcano to erupt if Jordan, if Egypt were to allow President Donald Trump to implement the plan he has announced recently? Do you think that could be a trigger? I mean, you know the Arab population, you know the Arab public better than most of us here. What is the mood, do you think? Could that be something that could trigger an Arab volcano?
Let me remind you that the first term of Trump, they used to talk about Safaqat al-Qarn. You remember Safaqat al-Qarn?
The deal of the century.
The deal of the century. They talk about the deal of the century. explaining that well, the problem would be solved and that the Arabs and Israeli would be okay, etc. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. So now he's doing the same thing. He's talking about something that wouldn't work for many reasons. First, the Palestinians wouldn't move. Second, the Arab regime would never accept it because they know that if they accept it, the volcano would erupt. So this guy, he's talking, but he has no. It won't work. He's just talking. I think. The Arab regime in Egypt and in Jordan, they are very, very afraid of the fact that they try everything to expel what they call the Islamist threat. So accepting this population means that they would import this Islamic threat, and will never accept. So I don't believe at all that there is a danger of expelling people from Gaza to the. But come back to my question, the first question, what would happen, because now we have what I call the Netanyahu solution. The Netanyahu solution means that more blockade of Gaza, more apartheid in Israel, and more colonization. That would mean that in fact we are going to have more and more war, more and more next. The future is pretty awful. Personally, I don't see any hope for the short term. Only that, of course, Gaza is prevailing. We are very proud of what happened. We are suffering because of the high cost, human cost, etc., etc. But what would happen in the next few years? This is the question. I think that nobody has a good idea of what's happening. Netanyahu or Trump or any. We have to expect that very serious problems are coming in the short term, the next year, maybe 2-3 years. The problem is not solved. That it would not be solved with the Netanyahu solution. Would be is it too early or too naive to talk about the Mandela solution? I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to discuss with some Israeli friends, with some Jewish friends, with some Western friends. Let's try to dream, because sometimes you have to dream before dream come to be reality.
So what's the Mandela solution when it comes to Palestine?
Mandela solution is what's happened in South Africa. I mean, the fact that white and black decided to live together, a state of this would be the only solution. I do believe that would be otherwise it would be the war forever and the destruction of the whole region. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. It's an honor for us to be here in front of yourself, Dr. Moncef. I thank the organising committee as well for